think we're going to have a juicy one here. Some political activists believed that using social media campaigns to demand artists change artistic elements of their work was a good thing. What did you think of this tactic?
Um, no, I'm pretty hardline on that one. I think artists should be free to express themselves freely. I mean, there are different contexts. Like if you take a commercial commission or something, then obviously you need to please your customer. But that kind of social pressure, it to me is just another form of censorship. And the ACLU agrees with me for whatever that's worth.
Where do you draw the line, though, between criticism and censorship?
Kind of as we said earlier, really. I would instead say, instead of criticism, I would say analysis. Analysis is fine, and you can even indulge in your subjective analysis. I don't like this because of XYZ. But the moment you start calling for something to change, or you try to spin some big societal issue out of it, it's like, oh well, I don't like games that involve violence against women, for example. Okay, fair. That's fair enough as your subjective personal choice. But when you start saying, okay, I don't like these games that have violence against women, and I think it contributes to violence against women in real life, and blah and blah and blah, then you're stepping beyond analysis or criticism, and you're making demands for change on a decidedly spurious basis.
Well, do you think that games can't have an impact on the culture people live in?
Not a meaningful one at a societal level, because we live in a pluralistic media ecosystem where there are many different messages, cross purposes, and so on. If all media thumped home the exact same message over and over again, which you don't find outside of controlled societies, then sure. And maybe you can tip the scales here and there a little bit, but I don't, despite being someone who produces media, I just don't think it's that powerful in and of itself.
I'm gonna go hard. So,
Go for it.
do you think that there's no such thing as a book or a movie or a video game that can have a negative impact on the world?
I would personally draw the line at the harm principle. So I think the only time in which you are justified in censoring or controlling things is when you can demonstrably prove directly that they cause harm. So things like a direct call for violence, for example, or arguably vaccine disinformation, these sorts of things, they're going to lead to people being harmed. And by harm, I mean, physical threat to life and limb, not offended sensibilities. So that's where I draw the line.
You said you're an atheist. What about the Bible or the
Yep.
Quran?
Well, I sadly, I don't think banning them has been historically very productive. So unfortunately, getting rid of them wouldn't do any good. And I think there's enough distance and room for interpretation in them that you can have more peaceful interpretations of them. If I could wave a magic wand and do away with religion, I probably would. But that's a godlike hypothetical, which just isn't going to happen. So as it is, there's good and bad, and repression doesn't work. So we're kind of stuck with it.
But have these books, in some ways, harmed the world, harmed human society?
We're probably less developed technologically and civilizationally than we could be by about 100 years or so because of them. But they have inspired people to be more charitable in some cases. I just think we can do it without the religion. Slavery is a good one because the Bible was both used to shore up and excuse slavery and to whip up sentiment against it and eventually to get it overturned. So, yeah, much as I would like to do away with these things, I think it's a bit swings and roundabouts.
Now, obviously, the Bible and Quran exist within a space where they're also religions. So it's not directly
Yeah,
analogous to video games.
yeah.
But what about Mein Kampf?
I was just about to bring that one up. Um, as a historian, I think it is important to have access to it, to examine it, and to understand it in order to understand the ideology and the motivations that were involved. But I don't think we see um, a real mass movement off the back of that anymore. And hopefully we never will again. But I think it has value in that context as a way of understanding. In the same way that I would be against the death penalty, even for serial killers, because it's much more effective to examine and try to understand them in order to better tackle the problem.
But the question isn't should Mein Kampf be banned. I agree it shouldn't. And I think there is
Hmm.
use in historically analyzing it. The question is, did Mein Kampf have a neutral impact on the world?
Have you read it?
No.
Okay, I have, and I didn't turn into a Nazi. So clearly, the text is not sufficient in and of itself to cause harm. And it is somewhat cagey most of the time. But context is king. I don't think we can ever truly separate anything from context.
You didn't turn into a Nazi, but do you think there could have been some people who were already perhaps some people who were more vulnerable to hearing out that message, especially in the 1920s and 1930s
In that
in Germany?
context, clearly people were more vulnerable to that, but also, the context was different, and there were things surrounding the book. There were the speeches, there was the resentment after the First World War that was fresh in a lot of people's minds, and the punitive damages that were enacted upon Germany. So you can take that book and say, well, then in that context, clearly it was a lot more dangerous than it is now in our modern context. And like I was saying earlier about pornography, the kind of people that are attracted to reading it may include people who would be dangerous, but they'd be dangerous whether they read it or not. They read it because they're dangerous. They're not dangerous because they read it.
If someone said in 1925 that Mein Kampf is bad for the world, they don't call for it being censored, not directly, but they say, I
Mm-hmm.
think that the world will be better off if books like this aren't written. Do you think that they would be calling for censorship?
Well, you kind of preempted a bit by saying they weren't calling for censorship.
Okay, fair enough. They're
Um,
not directly saying ban this book, but they are saying I think the world would be better off if books like this didn't get made.
I think you're better off, generally speaking, making the arguments against the ideology that's there, rather than banning it. And in fact, Germany is a great example of this, because there were attempts to ban the Nazi Party, to ban them from wearing uniforms, or ban any organization from wearing uniforms, for banning gatherings, for banning the Horst March as a song, and all of these only ended up feeding into the movement, building more resentment, getting them more converts, getting them more sympathy. And I think this is another aspect we have to be very careful of, because censoring people or going after them does often create a certain amount of legitimacy to them. I mean, look at Russell Brand, right? It seems very much like he's guilty of the things he's been accused of. But he set himself up as this countercultural truth speaker, whatever. And so people almost instantly have spun up, oh, this is all a conspiracy. They're out to get him because he tells the truth about X, Y, or Z. And the attempts to censor him, to demonetize him, to throw him off various platforms, to cancel him, if you will, only seem to have made his audience that much more hardcore and that much more willing to believe him. So it's backfired a lot.
But is the statement that Mein Kampf is a net negative for humanity inherently a call for banning Mein Kampf?
I'm having a hard time separating it, because you did say it was a call for censorship. In and of itself, as a statement, I don't think it is. If it got more specific, I think it could.
What about I think Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball is a net negative for humanity?
I'm gonna want to hear why, and I'm gonna want to see some proof.
They because they would probably say, and you would just say, well, where's the proof that this causes this? But they would probably say something along the lines of, games like this promote the objectification of women. It's very obvious that the vast majority of the people playing the game aren't playing it because they like volleyball. They're playing it because they want to look at sexy women in bikinis and stare at their tits and their crotch and their butts and jiggly physics and whatever else is in the game. And that this probably promotes an unhealthy attitude towards women to some extent, if not for everyone, then perhaps for some small subset of people.
Okay, see, then you're actually having an argument about things that you can investigate on a factual basis, right? And I would point to the evidence that this isn't true. And I would probably make the argument that the representation of a thing isn't the thing. So these aren't women; they are pixels on a screen. They are representations of women. They are not women. And so your concern for an entirely fictional being is very sweet, but possibly misplaced. And I think we could have the evidential argument, and I think they would lose on the evidential basis, provided they were willing to listen to reason, of course.
They might also argue, too, that even if it doesn't cause people to do bad things in real life, that by being exposed to these ideas, being exposed to the idea of women, fictional women in this case, but women in the video game, being objects for the player's sexual gratification, that this could, to some small extent, let's say, because okay, let me reframe it in a way that's better, more strong, steelmanny. Uh, Human beings take into account stimuli in their environments, right?
Mm-hmm.
As part of this, They learn things from their environments. You see, there's a forest, there's a road that goes through the forest. There's dead deer on the road that got hit by cars. You've learned
Hmm.
something about that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you draw certain conclusions from it. Maybe you think, wow, humans have paved over nature, and that's bad. Maybe you think, well, there's too many deer. We need to start hunting more. You could draw many different conclusions, completely different ones, right?
Hmm.
And movies, video games probably have like some degree of impact on society or life. Like Star Wars was kind of a big deal, still is decades later, right?
Yeah.
Have people learned things from Star Wars? Has it informed our politics to some extent, or our lifestyles, or our culture?
Uh, Probably in provision of metaphors and a common narrative that we can all point to, as people used to with Shakespeare or whatever.
But not in the sense of, wow, Emperor Palpatine seemed like a bad person. Maybe dictatorships are bad. Not in that way.
I think Star Wars itself is drawing on, older narratives and a certain experience, post World War II. I mean, that's the trouble. None of this stuff exists in a vacuum. So the beach volleyball player is not only exposed to dead or alive beach volleyball, they also consume lots of other media with other messages. Feminist media that's got nothing to do with either. They might see a news article about a repressive Islamic regime where women have to be covered up all the time. We get stuff from everywhere. Even with the road example, maybe you've also driven on other roads. Um, Maybe you've seen geoengineering done, like a dam or something. So maybe not all paving is bad. Maybe we can use our engineering to preserve wetlands or whatever else. Maybe in other places there aren't enough deer, or somewhere they've you pass by a sign, wolves in this area. Oh, they've released wolves. Maybe they're trying to return the area to nature a bit. None of this stuff exists in a vacuum.
Okay, I'm done going hard. We could go this all day, but I'm more probably sympathetic to your argument, um, because here's what I'm sort of struggling with, and perhaps you could help me navigate this. On some level, they're making a claim, and that claim probably does need to be justified through evidence. You probably do need to show that that people playing dead or alive beach volleyball has some negative impact. Like you probably if you want to like actually make the claim that it's bad, you probably do have to have studies that indicate that. But at
Yeah.
the same time, it's not like super far fetched to think that somebody who all they do all day for 90% of the time, right? All they do is they go to work, they come straight home, and they play their big tittied anime simulator. It's not super far fetched to think that they do that every day for 10 years, and they're like so overwhelmed by this amount of very limited life experience that it does perhaps change their perception in some way, right?
Okay. It's it's very hard for me to separate from the specific and to try and think about this more generally. So I give up. I will just talk in the specific. Such a person is not going to be a problem for anybody else because they're going to be a shut in. So that's a less than ideal situation, and it's maybe not good for that individual. But there are going to be a ton of other people who have a healthier relationship with it, who do partake in other games. And frankly, him with his weird attitudes being stuck in his apartment is probably better for civilization at large than him being out and about with those same attitudes.
And I would counter that too. Am I supposed to be making arguments for things I believe in? Shit, fuck. For the It's like, aren't I supposed to be like, I'm playing devil's advocate to try and like make it more balanced? Do I really want to like sink my own arguments? Uh, no, fuck it. Well, actually, I feel like it's more honest if I do. It's because it is a conversation. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think that like the vast majority of people who play like Dead or Alive or whatever the big titty games, um,
Mm-hmm.
they are like just normal people who like have this like fun niche hobby that they do, and that's like a thing that they're into. And like in other aspects of life, they're like mostly normal. And like
Mm-hmm.
even if there are like some small number of them who like are way too obsessed with this shit, like don't get girlfriends and like or become like incels and stuff because they're so obsessed with masturbating to their Dead or Alive game, like that's a mental health problem that's like probably unrelated to gaming. And there's probably like other aspects of their life that are going wrong that's leading them down that
Yeah.
route. That's like
And
how I think about it. But
well, yeah, and so how many hundreds of people are having a healthy relationship with the game and deriving enjoyment and fun and satisfaction of whatever kind from playing it? And is it worth denying all of those people a little bit of jiggly titties just because there's this one guy who's kind of weird and is a statistical outlier?
all right, I think we can move beyond that.
Okay.
Well, actually, there's one more aspect I want to talk about.
Go for it.
Um, do you have any thoughts on the removal of content from some foreign games when they are localized?
Yes. It's another one of these hypocrisy things that really, really bothers me. Because the same people that seem to excuse or demand censorship through localization are the very same people who will bang on about cultural appropriation or colonialism or something, but then they're perfectly happy to overwrite aspects of usually Japanese culture because they deem it to be unacceptable. When I choose to experience something from another culture, I want to experience that other culture. Don't be telling me rice balls are jelly donuts, okay? Just don't be doing it. I want to learn about the other culture. I just bought the Rig Veda, the Hindu holy book to read through because I'm fascinated by South Asian culture. And if you localize that and change the names of all the gods to Jesus, it wouldn't be much use to me now, would it? And so it goes for other media. The hypocrisy of it, I just don't understand how they can hold those two ideas in their head at the same time. That cultural imperialism is bad, that cultural appropriation is bad, but at the same time we have to censor this Japanese game because reasons.
Hi, I'm Tachyon Blue. Thank you for watching another one of my Gamergate book video segments. Altogether, I've interviewed over 70 people involved with Gamergate, and I'm going to be launching a Kickstarter campaign in the coming weeks. So please, I need your support to help make this project a reality. I'm turning these 70 plus interviews into a multi-volume series of books, the first volume of which is already completed. And so I'd like you to please stay tuned for more information about the Kickstarter. And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and comment. More updates will be coming in the near future. Thank you, and take care.